Yo.
Dude, where the hell are you? You gotta get down here.
Well, there might be a slight issue with that.
The Poker Palooza's going on. It's 120K guaranteed. That's more than you make in a week. Get your ass down here.
Shit. Hi, bendeach, how you doing? Boss.
Ben, you just missed it. You're gonna have to find a way to get here faster next time. We got a cash game seat for you though.
Alright, so it is the 207th vlog. How about this? This is kind of like a sports-like stat you'll see in games where they kind of cherry-pick numbers. For just under 5 weeks, from mid-February to mid-March, my win-loss record was 24-3, and I was up over $22,000. From March 24th to March 30th, my win-loss record was 1-4. And I was down over $6,000. I guess that's a pretty predictable downswing, given that epic upswing. The Palooza's going on. Let's see what these games look like today. It was a week in which we saw two of our game's most legendary players go head-to-head in about a $5,000 pot. It was Mr. Z's Pocket Kings against Ms. T's middle pair. Doesn't take much in this game sometimes, and her 5 paired on the first board to salvage a chop in that spot. I also hated to see Slick sit down and make the nut flush on his first hand only to lose to quad aces on the river. Also, I don't use these, but I found it funny that a cell phone stand exists under the brand name Pocket Jack. Who knew? I would jump into a 0-5-10 winner straddle game, and the first hand would come when we would get a limp under the gun 1, and I am in middle position 1 and make it 40 with ace-queen offsuit. Hijack in the button call, and the limper completes. So with 165 in, the flop comes ace, 10, 8, all diamonds. It gets checked to me, and I make a $60 value bet, and the hijack snap folds, but the button, an older gentleman who I've played with a decent amount, who I've never seen make a play without a very big hand, fires in $160, and the other player folds. Obviously, you could argue that I should continue on here with the queen of diamonds in my hand, but I just don't like that idea. Generally speaking, the worst hand that this opponent is going to make this play with is ace-king with the king of diamonds. And he obviously could have already flopped a flush, in which case I'd be fighting an uphill battle. So, I decided to just lay this hand down right now. And while I don't know for a fact that it was the correct laydown, I did get a look at the king of diamonds in his hand. So, we know my flush draw wasn't good. I'm guessing my pair wasn't either. That would be the only hand I would vlog on table 1 on this day. I'd get into the game on table 5, where Mr. Z and Ms. T could be found, along with several other players who like to give action. And the really good news, there were no pros in the game. Under the gun opens to 40. I have queen 10 of spades and make the call +1. 5 other players decide to come in. And with 280 in, the board comes out queen, queen 8, rainbow. Under the gun bets 60 here. With all of these players behind, I just don't love the idea of raising here and getting all the hands that could pay me off to fold and potentially only keeping the stronger ones in there. So with that in mind, I just call. MP1 calls behind. Then the short stack jams all in the hijack for $230. Under the gun calls that bet. Obviously, I'm calling as well. And I thought MP1 might go out here, but he decides to call as well. And at that point, he was the guy that I was most concerned about, potentially having king-queen or queen-jack in this spot. With 1,200 in, the turn is a king. Under the gun checks. I had to decide about value betting here with my 10 kicker. In hindsight, I definitely should have done it. But here, I decided to check, concerned about the guy on my left who had just sat down in the game. And to me, that's usually an indication of the fact that they're probably not going to be all that light if it's their first hand being played on the day. He decides to check, however, and the river rolls off the 9 of spades. It's a card that I hated. By the way, I didn't realize just how much I would hate this card. But it was a spot where after under the gun checked, I still had to figure out a value bet sizing into a dry side pot, so I figured I need to go way down here to get paid off by his 2 pair hands here. So I decided to just bet $80. MP1 folds, so I have no idea what the heck he ended up having here. And it's back on the original razor under the gun, and he ends up snap calling me, showing that he has pocket aces. So I would win the very small side pot, but the hijack, who had been all in on the flop, rolls over the queen 9 to win the main pot. So a brutal river for me, and thanks to it, he's no longer short stacked anymore. I would add on $1,000, so I was in for 2 on the day, and then I would 3-bet ace-king and get an ace-high flop. But in typical fashion would lose the hand, in this case to a player who turned 2 pair. Thankfully, I was able to make a good fold to minimize the damage. I was hoping that the tide would turn when I would get aces, but unfortunately, that would only result in me winning a $35 heads-up pot. After that, I would finally win a little money on the day, raising king-queen and getting 2 streets of value out of king-4 on a king-high flop, before the river went check-check when front door spades ended up coming in.
This is a mid-session update.
Bendeach just stole our beer.
I was then in the straddle, and as will happen 38% of the time, I'm convinced, I picked up 8 deuce. I would then open 35 with ace, queen of diamonds, MP2, and get 3 callers. So with 145 in, we get a board that comes out queen, jack 5, 2 spades, and 1 diamond, and I would bet 75. Folds to the button, who was the last person in the hand I really wanted to give me action, and he decides to call. And with 295 in, the turn is a complete brick, which is obviously what I was hoping to see. He certainly is not going to be slow playing sets. Rarely ever here, I don't believe. So chances are he's going to have a really big draw here, and I need to charge him significantly. So I decided to bet $200, and I think it's clear that my read was accurate, as he did think about it for quite some time, but decided to finally throw the hand away. How about this? I then managed to raise ace-king, get an ace-high board, and win the pot with 2 turn folds. Truly amazing stuff. So I do win a little there, but I was still stuck several hundred on the day. I'd finally get an end seat. I strongly prefer to not vlog in the middle seats because I think this vlog has proven that it has the best in-game video of any vlog out there, and the 5 seat makes that tough to get. I then look up to see a rematch of the 2014 World Series, Giants-Royals. Some great memories of that win, which have been followed only by a decade of nothing but heartbreak from my 49ers, Giants, and Golden Knights. I'd won that hand with ace-king earlier, and I'd get a chance to potentially do it again here when we get a few limps, and I'm in the button straddle, and would use my option to make it 50 more. The under-the-gun limper, who in this case is Mr. Z, is my only caller. So with 140 in, the flop is ace-6-8, 2 clubs, giving me top pair, top kicker, and he decides to check. I bet 65 here, obviously hoping to get action. I don't get called. I get check raised to 225. So I'm in a tough spot. There's a good chance that he's putting me on ace-king here. Because the problem with ace-king is that everybody puts you on ace-king. But I figured it was reasonable to think, against a very aggressive opponent, that he could also have a lot of draws here. I do have the backdoor nut flush draw possibility as well. So with that in mind, I make the call. And with 590 in, the turn is the deuce of hearts, and he bets 400. That's going to be my cue to exit. Ace-king always struggles when pots get this big, and this is no exception. I fold the hand, and he shows 8-6 offsuit for 2 pair, pretty much exactly what I expected to see. I would then come in with the 9 deuce. Do I have to tell you that I'm in the rock? And sure enough, I'd get a 9 deuce 10 flop. Unfortunately, and this was extremely unfortunate, Ms. T, who has absolutely no idea how to play a small pot, ended up having 9-10 offsuit. For the bigger 2 pair, I would end up giving her 200 on the flop and 300 on the turn. Thankfully, the river was an action killer. I was already in the hole on the day, and that just made it significantly worse.
It's kind of human nature, and maybe this happens to myself too. I would say it's probably a somewhat accurate tell. If somebody wins a big pot and they're stacking chips, and then they raise the very next hand, unless it has something to do with like superstition, which obviously it doesn't with me. Usually that's going to be at least a fairly strong hand, because it's human nature sort of for people on the cusp to just fold out because they're stacking their chips. It's kind of the same concept of like someone who just got their food or someone who's eating, being a little bit stronger when they get involved, because in the spots that are close, it doesn't cost that much to just not get involved.
A look around Peppermill and a listen to some good advice on the latest episode of the Crush Live Poker Podcast. It's the best live poker training for games of this size you'll find anywhere on the internet, and you can always get 25% off for life on a basic, premium, or elite subscription just by using the link in the description below. I'd returned from eating tacos to find Slick in the game. I haven't done this in a while on the vlog, but with Mr. Z and Mr. C in the game, that means on a night in which we have 4 5-10 rock games at Peppermill that this had officially become the main game. I would then just call to the right of the rock with King 8 of hearts, because limpin' is pimpin'. And the button decides to make it 125 here. Folds back to me. I have not really done a good job of getting dealt the best hand on the day. So, I figure I'm going to give the whole limp raise bluffing thing a shot here. I decide to make it 275 more, trying to represent the notion that I limped in with pocket kings. The button picks up his cards, shows 10-4 offsuit, throws it into the muck saying that he was indeed just trying to steal. Also, if I can make another sports observation, the Tampa Bay Rays should definitely bring back the word devil and those uniforms. That is the end of that observation.
All right. I haven't gotten a massage. This is the first massage in vlog history. And I gotta say, it is effective. Can you tell the viewers your name?
Sierra.
Sierra?
Yes.
All right, Sierra, I have a sneaking prediction. It's going to become an instantaneous fan favorite.
Oh, is this good?
That's my prediction. And how often do you massage here at the Peppermill?
At least once a week, usually.
All right.
Usually Saturday nights I'm here.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say you're going to have some more business after this airs.
Come and see me.
By the way, Sierra told me that she once had a guy pay for a 6.5-hour massage at a blackjack table at the Silver Legacy. I don't feel like doing the math, but at $2 a minute, that's going to add up. I usually have 8 deuce in the rock. This time, it's the other end of the spectrum. I'd raise 40 more after 2 callers. Both of those guys decide that they're going to see this flop with me. And with 150 in, it comes Jack 10 deuce rainbow. I decide on a half pot sized bet here, and sure enough, I get 1 call. So with 300 in, the turn is a queen, and he checks. This was the only guy in the game that wasn't a local, and I'd seen him slow play a big hand against Ms. T an hour earlier, and had reason to believe that the same thing could be happening here. It was also possible that he could have turned a hand that beat me. I also thought that if I checked back, he might bluff the river, or might pay me off lighter if I bet it. So ultimately, I decided to check that card back, and the river card came out a 4, and he decided to check. Since he didn't bet, I figured that my best play was to make sure that I got paid off by all of his jacks. So I just bet $85 here, and he thinks for a minute and decides to pay off, creating a $470 pot. I show my hand, and he mucks. I'd walk away from the table to return to see the 2 heavyweights bumping heads, Ms. T and Slick, battling this time in what proved to be nearly a $10,000 pot.
I'm all in.
She ended up folding the river, and apparently
Count it down.
put him on exactly
Please.
what he had.
I'm asking you to count this shit down, because I'm the best player ever.
Hard to argue.
What'd you say?
Fourth is full with eight.
2, and I've been playing cards for a long time. Pardon me, she called my hand perfectly. I'm gonna show.
We got to give the people what they want. It is Kayla Corner. Kayla, did you see that? Have you seen the movie Project X?
Oh, no. Why isn't it Project K?
That's a very valid question. But if you didn't know, Rena's son, who's an absolute legend, he's 15 years old, held the ultimate house party.
Yes.
And I think I can cut to some footage of it right here.
To the break of dawn, yo!
This kid, at 15 years old, is cooler than I've ever been.
In your whole life.
Right.
This kid is the coolest.
I find it incredibly unfair.
Well, then you gotta keep working.
We then get a limp fest, and I'm in the straddle with King Queen of Spades. I make it 100 here in the low jack. The button's my only color. With 250 in, the flop comes out Jack 9-6 rainbow, 1 spade. With 2 overcards, a gutter, and a backdoor flush draw, I felt this was a good enough spot to try to bluff him off his medium pairs here. So I bet 135. He thinks about it for a second and decides he's not going anywhere. So with 520 in, the turn is the ace of clubs. Definitely an interesting card. It could have easily made his hand, but it's also a card that I can use to represent something here. So, this time, I fire 240. And fortunately, he barely thinks about it for a second before tossing his cards into the muck, and the double barrel bluff works out for me on a day where I wasn't wasting hardly any time actually making the best hand, so it was nice to at least get a bluff through in that spot. I would then be in the rock again, and once more, 8 deuce. Then Ms. T would recoup a lot of the chips she had lost to Slick, as she set over set a player who just ran terribly at the worst time. The day was already one that was pretty miserable. And over the next 3 hours, it only got worse. I was dealt a plethora of good starting hands, and I flopped a multitude of big draws and simply bricked out and lost all of those hands. It was miserable and excruciating because Slick was seemingly blasting off in every hand, including this one, when he fired $14,000 into Mr. Z, apparently with just top and bottom pair, kind of a spot where he's only getting called when he's beat type scenario. Anyway, I could just not get into any good spots against him. I would stop rolling video hoping that that would result in me turning this day around. It wouldn't. I continued to just spiral downhill. And it was particularly tilting because I knew what a great game I was in and what a great opportunity this was with no pros, the double Ds being nowhere to be found, and all the players I want in the game. And yet I could not get dealt the best hand to save my life. It was almost a death by 1,000 cuts situation for me until finally, at an hour later than I usually play, I wouldn't even need to rack up. I would just pick up my remaining chips, jam them in my pocket, and walk out the door to book the loss. All right, it's just before midnight. Not really any question. One of the most aggravating sessions I've ever vlogged. $1,781 loss, which could have been worse. As I say, you book your biggest losses in the best games. We definitely had one of the best games tonight. The guy that's ramming and jamming every single hand, playing like a maniac and slick, ends up winning $5,000. And I just end up getting destroyed, as I was talking about, with the fact that I just bricked every single draw that I had all night, basically, and rarely ever had the best hand after 7 o'clock. So definitely a couple mistakes I could have avoided. About as disappointed as I'm capable of being. Leaving this place on a vlog in which I had high hopes for obvious reasons. And come to think of it, I don't even have a goddamn car here. All right, well, somehow managed to make it home without the car. It was tough, I gotta tell you. What a journey it was. And man, I don't think I've ever been so disappointed in the result of a vlog as I am with this one. If I were a lesser vlogger, I would just lie and say that I made a miraculous comeback and booked a big win on a vlog that obviously I put a lot of work into, but that's not how we do things. So got to bounce back from this loss coming up in the next week. Got to give a shout out to a guy who helped revamp the logos here on this vlog. Kyle Shepard reached out and said, I think I can do better than the logo that's on there. And sure enough, he was right. So definitely an improvement there, and appreciation for the work that he put in. I also appreciate those of you who have jumped on to the Carolina Poker Club on the ClubGG app. That's where I've been getting some reps in occasionally when I'm just hanging out here at home on the phone. And you can always sign up and get a 10% deposit bonus just by mentioning this vlog to the hosts on Telegram. Carolina Poker, you can use the link in the description below. If you play online poker, obviously GG Poker is the name, the place to be. But if you're playing in the US, well, got to play on ClubGG. And the host there, very trustworthy, very efficient at those transactions, so I highly recommend that. I got to tell a story about my son. He was over here a couple days back when the Vegas Golden Knights were playing in Nashville against the Predators. And I haven't got him to be able to start saying, like, let's go Golden Knights or something like that. But what he has noticed is when two teams are playing, that one of them's good and one of them's bad. So he always asks me, which is which? So he always says, is white good, Daddy? And since they were in Nashville, they were the road team. I said, yes, white is good. So he'd spent that game saying, let's go white. It was just truly adorable. But the next game was against the LA Kings in Vegas on Thursday. And the Golden Knights home uniforms are somewhat similar in color to the Nashville Predators home uniforms. And then the Kings were on the road, so they were wearing white. So he was all confused when I started saying, no, this time we're rooting for the gold team. Last time it was the white team. So I don't know if he wrapped his head around that or not, but it was fun. Really the first experience that I've had watching sports with my 3-year-old son, Austin. So that was a fun last couple of days. Certainly a lot more fun than the result of this vlog. No doubt about that. Follow on Twitter and Instagram at bendeach, and I'm going to give some shout outs on the way out the door.
up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. What keeps you up at night, yeah. Make all the demons quiet, yeah. We were built to thrive, yeah. I think that we've all had enough, yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. You got me like, oh yeah. I think that we've all had enough. Sick of dealing with the old plan. They know that we're calling it wrong. Hey, it's too late to try to go contain it. A generation fueled by creation. We live lives on a small screen nation. We control the airwaves, no negotiation.